Hi guys, I wanted to go over some of the examples that we went over in class, mainly Gregor Mendel's experiment that led to what we know about genetic inheritance. This is the foundation of genetic inheritance, and it's really important to understand how we came to this conclusion. So Gregor Mendel knew that he had true breeding green pea plants, meaning that if he crossed a green pea with a green pea, he was guaranteed that 100% of his crop would be green peas. He also had yellow peas, which he knew were true breeding because if he crossed a yellow pea with a yellow pea, 100% of his crop was yellow. This led him to create these kinds of charts or Punnett squares, where he could safely assume that one gamete was donated had the green allele and the other gamete that was donated also had the green allele. Same thing with yellow. The yellow allele was inherited, one from the female donor and one from the male donor. Then he got this clever idea. What might happen if I mix a green pea with a yellow pea? So he did that experiment. He crossed yellow with green. According to his Punnett square, he could pretty safely assume that he would inherit one Y allele and one G allele, or one yellow allele and one green allele. But what color do you think the crop was? Well, it turns out that the crop was 100% yellow. So Gregor Mendel was a little confused. They're all yellow, but I know that I crossed it with a green pea. Well, not being quite sure what's happening, he decided that he was going to take one of these yellow peas that were the offspring of the green and yellow and breed it with another offspring that was yellow, because he wasn't quite sure where the green genes went to. So that's exactly what he did. He took one of the offspring and bred it with another offspring. Now he knew he had at least one yellow allele because they were the color yellow, but he wasn't quite sure what was happening with that second allele. So what color do you think the offspring was this time? Well, it turns out that 75% of the offspring was yellow, but 25%, 1/4 of the offspring, were green. So that led him to the conclusion that maybe these yellow peas are carriers for this disappearing green gene. So according to his Punnett squares, he could safely assume that this one had two green alleles, which means they could only have come from the carrier parents. And that's exactly what is happening, and that's exactly what's going on. We end up with a dominant yellow color anytime we have a heterozygote. And if we have a homozygous recessive, is the only time that that green color shows up. So this led him to the theory of genetic inheritance or autosomal inheritance, where dominant alleles will outshine recessive alleles. But it was a good thing he was studying peas, because that's not exactly what happens in all cases. So let's experiment with some roses. Here I have a variety of true breeding red roses, and I have the same variety of true breeding white roses. What's going to happen when I breed a red rose with a white rose? Well, according to Gregor Mendel, I should probably get 100% red roses, since it seems like red should be dominant over white. That's not what happens though. It turns out with this variety of roses, we have a blending of the color. They meet somewhere in between red and white because neither allele is dominant. This is called incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance means neither allele is dominant and they both kind of blend together. Well, now I have a different variety. Just bear with me. I know they look like the exact same roses, but it's a different variety of rose. But I do have true breeding red of this variety, and I do have true breeding white of this variety. What do you think is going to happen when I cross these two roses? Well, according to our last experiment, we might expect pink. According to Gregor Mendel's experiment, we might expect red. Neither of those things is what's happening with this variety of rose, though, because they actually both show up. The red is dominant, so it is expressed, and the white is dominant, so it's expressed, and they're both kind of fighting to be expressed. We call this co-dominance because both alleles are dominant and they both want to be expressed. This can show up as stripes or spots or speckles or marbling. So again, in complete dominance, we see a blending of colors, and co-dominance, we see both colors showing through. Now, let's talk about another example that we went over in class, the sex-linked genes. So Thomas Morgan Hunt did this experiment with fruit flies, and fruit flies are another really great model to study genetics because not only do they have a lot of weird little funky things going on, but they breed really quickly. So when I was in graduate school, I spent a lot of time counting flies and seeing whether their eyes were red or white. Now, red is definitely the more common color, but it's interesting what happens when you breed a female with white eyes and a male with red eyes. Remembering that the female will always donate an X chromosome to their offspring, the male can either donate an X or a Y. So anytime we have a cross, we have a 50% chance of getting female and 50% chance of getting males. But what ends up happening is if I have a white-eyed female, 100% of my males will have white eyes. It's interesting that it only affects the male, even though the mother had white eyes. 100% of the females will not have white eyes. They will have the normal wild type red eye. Conversely, we can breed a white-eyed male, take one of these white-eyed males and breed it with a red-eyed female, and we'll end up with all red offspring. All red offspring, 100% red offspring. So what exactly is going on here? Well, remember, the female is donating an X and the male is donating either an X or a Y. So this is going to affect the females and the males differently. This is what's known as sex-linked. So here we have the female has donated this X-linked gene to both of her daughters, or 100% of her daughters and 100% of her sons. But since the male is unaffected, he's also donating the X to 50% of his offspring, his daughters, and not donating an X to the males. So this gene really only shows up when it is on both X's. So you see this mother has two X chromosomes, and both of them have this mutation. Whereas the female offspring, we can call carriers because they only have one X that is affected, meaning they still have a normal gene here and it will shine through with the normal colored eyes. Whereas males don't have that chance. They don't have a second X chromosome. They only have one X chromosome. So if they inherit that X-linked mutation, they are going to express it. This is why things like color blindness are expressed more in males than females. Females can be carriers and they can be affected, but if they are affected, they have to inherit both copies. So according to the diagram, is the wild type eyes dominant or recessive? Well, the wild type would be dominant and white eyes would be X-linked recessive because it affects the males more commonly than the females. Here we have a mother that is white-eyed. She has two recessive X-linked traits. Here, her sons, the male offspring, will express that X-linked trait because they only inherit one X from the mother. Whereas the females, they will inherit the mutated X from the mother, but they also inherit a normal type X from the father, which shines through. It is dominant to that recessive linked trait. I hope that this helps to clarify some of the questions about genetic inheritance and why we think the things that we think, or why we know what we know. It's based on these classic experiments, so understanding the classic experiments can be very helpful.